to know that we will not run the whole 161-minute treatment. I can possibly sit through it again, but the two sections we're going to show are the most critical, and it's been difficult as a filmmaker to pull it out like this because there's so much gesture in the work that is very much critical to the piece. So if you haven't seen the movie, I do encourage you to watch the entire thing as opposed to just these two sections, because there's a larger train of thought. But for the focus of this, and keep this very brief, the first section that we're going to show is called Social Pathology, which is basically a treatment on, or criticism more specifically, of the modern market system, monetary market economy that's dominant today across the world. Foundational premise being that it's the root source of the majority of the social problems we see in the world today. And then we're going to have hopefully 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A, see how long it goes. And then we'll run the second section, which I'll describe right before we run it. It's called Project Earth, and it's basically the counterpart to the first section, which will detail what a new society based on very simple rational premises about how human systems relate to Earth systems would come to be. And there's a train of thought that's presented. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you.
Out on your own.
Do we have a mic for the audience?
Absolutely, and we also have Dr. Bettina Wolf, who will be coming any minute to be helping with the Q&A as well.
Beautiful.
And Dr. Bettina Wolf, the co-founder of the Artivist Film Tour. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. So, Peter, where should we start?
Well, I think all that needed to be said overall is right there, so I'm just interested to hear any criticisms, feedback, and general questions from the audience, especially those that have never been hit with this type of data, because it's certainly not the most popular thing to talk about in a world that's basically running on this methodology. And naturally, identity associations emerge. I'll just say off the cuff that I consider the modern economic system we have today as a religion. It's basically supported by religious thought. It's without a logical rhetoric anymore. It had one at one point, just like early religions did. So I'll leave it at that. The value systems are the problem, and that's what I'm interested to hear response-wise from those that might in fact disagree with some of the statements that are made. So, questions?
Yes, and on that note, please, let's go ahead and start with our questions from the audience. Now, before we do begin with our questions, a reminder to please rise, please stand, and tell us your name, give us your question, and make sure that you stand and speak loudly, clearly, and please keep your questions short, brief, as much as possible, so that we can answer your questions, and then quickly move on to other people in the audience. We want to give as many people as possible an opportunity to ask a question, so please keep your questions and comments brief. Yes, sir.
Peter, concerning the quality of people's lives, all our lives, today with the internet, the ability for each of us to produce high quality, like family histories of ourselves as we raise our children, as we experience times with our family and friends. A lot of us, and I'm talking about myself, I have a 9-year-old son, and I cannot afford to have photographers and the web designers, webmasters, they call them, and all this stuff. I'm sorry, short. The question is, can't we make an economy based on our value of our individual lives using webmasters and photographers and videographers and all that stuff, and make that our economy that's unused?
Do you mean as far as labor? As far as everyone's contribution economically, as college in the wheel, you mean everyone will be in that kind of field? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think I dream of being able to have a photographer follow me around the day and I take care of my kids. Of course, I can't afford to do this. But if we make an economy out of building these websites for ourselves, our own personal, we can make an economy based on that.
Well, I see.
Thank you.
I see the economic structure as our scientific knowledge has grown. All the assumptions that we made about human behavior, about how we relate to the environment, have changed dramatically, as with any philosophical view, if you want to refer to it as such. Early economists were just philosophers. They dealt fundamentally with patterns of human behavior, and they made assumptions about the environment. One, that there would always be scarcity, but yet simultaneously there's a paradox, and we orient our economy based on infinite growth, which is quite comedic when you think about it. But to answer your question overall, it's a root train of thought. As I'll talk about in the next section after this Q&A called Project Earth, I hope it will illuminate to you that there isn't a subjective element here. There's only one fundamental premise that we can associate with this planet and creating good public health. With the natural pre-programming that we have, so we avoid disorders, mental illness, physical problems, stability, conflict, all the things that everyone talks about, but we have yet to be able to achieve because everything, unfortunately, in the system is against it. So when you see that section, maybe you can revise your question.
Next question, please. The lady straight ahead. Okay, the gentleman straight ahead. For the record, there is a lady there as well, so I was pointing towards the lady.
I wasn't sure the way you reacted. Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for being the light in the darkness. I mean, my whole life I've been searching for the answers, and this is literally the only thing I've come upon that really hits the nail on the head. I chose to become vegetarian. I became a massage therapist, trying to make the world better, trying to think away. I never could figure out your perspective, which is thinking outside the box, one system.
I get it. I wouldn't say it's my perspective. It's a perspective I think all of us are going to realize soon enough as this system continues its failure.
Because of you. You are the light. Before I ask my question,
please.
Your movies, I think, focus a little too much on the negative and not enough on the positive. You know? I think it should be 1% on the problems, we all know the problems, and 90% on the solution.
Well, I guess I would just disagree with the fact that the problems are not, unfortunately, known. You might know them, but the vast majority of people, based on average behavior and what we're doing as a society, is not aware of these issues. And as the term Zeitgeist implies, the spirit of the age, unfortunately, I would say that the spirit of the age is in deficiency. So there's a reason why it's off kilter. And eventually through time, I'd love to make works that were more illuminating the positive things. And in fact, in the third section you'll see, after this, it is in fact neutral. It's not, it shows the potentialities of the species. It shows what we could do with our technological and scientific knowledge and how amazing and unbelievable our lives could be. Limited stress, great public health, advancement, prosperity. But we have to get out of the system to do it. If there's anything that you can't tell people solutions without giving them, the reason for that causality. Hence, I have to harp a lot on the market system as it is in order to get that through.
Okay, now for my question.
And you have to keep it brief because we have a lot of other people with questions.
These things fly by. We only have like 25 minutes for this particular scene.
The Venus Project.
The Venus Project.
That is the main focus, I would say. These movies are, showing us the Venus Project.
Sort of.
I think we all want a utopian society, but I need more details. How am I cared for when I get old? How is transactions done?
So your question is how? Can you repeat that? Can you?
Just all I'm looking for is a little more details about the Venus Project, or how we're going to fix this.
So more details on the Venus Project.
I think it's dangerous to associate only with institutions. At the core of the Venus Project and Jacques Fresco's work, which is also at the core of Buckminster Fuller's work, which is also at the core of many other great thinkers out there that try to apply just what really is common knowledge scientific efficiency to society holistically, is a train of thought. And the Zeitgeist film series as a whole is actually more about the underlying train of thought and what really makes sense. The first film approached certain truths. The second film was an explorative one that introduced this new train of thought. And the third film was expanded on that. And my future films will continue to move along that genre of what actually makes sense for human society, regardless of the category. Because you could take this in many different ways. So to answer your question specifically, how does it operate? There's no way I can begin to describe that to you in this type of setting. You have to first realize that it would be so different in values that even a lot of the things that you find normality in your life would probably end up being alienating, would probably end up being counterproductive, would probably end up being bad in the conditioning and hence inefficient. And that's the danger of this type of communication. And that's why I'm always intrigued. I've done dozens and dozens of hours of Q&As by now, and I'm amazed to see the common pattern that exists throughout. The majority of the objections with respect to how it operates always come down to a sense of personal freedom. And the great fallacy of human life is that we have no freedom. We are locked into an Earth system. This system dictates exactly how we're supposed to be, and all we can do is align with it, and all of our values will be compromised as such. And that's beautiful. It doesn't have to be a negative type of thing to think that way. So that's just the nature of it. But the specifics of the system, maybe in a future film, or if you research the Zeitgeist movement materials, and of course go to the materials of the Venus Project, and even other thinkers like Mr. Fuller, there's many out there, you'll begin to see the logic will come to you as well.
The lady on the right over here, if you could please rise and ask your question loudly so we can all hear you nice and clear.
Actually, my name is Catherine, and I'm sorry for the short notice, but Jamie Schechter was wondering if you could be a guest on his radio show tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Unfortunately, I'm flying out tomorrow early in the morning, so I could do a telephone with him later, but we can talk about that.
Okay, and my second point is I just want to sort of comment on what was said already, that I think wanting everything to be positive kind of got us where we are right now. And facing the negative and facing, the debt, is what we have to do. And, that's what so I thank you for going into the debt and really looking at how really deep it is.
Well, thank you. I think you can look at this in a neutral evolution. It doesn't have to be that, oh, things are so bad, it's horrible, I want to shoot myself. They look at it as a cultural evolution, because all of this stuff is natural. The early market system was basically based on everyone being a producer. So if you fish, I maybe good at cutting down trees and building homes, and we developed these mediums of exchange to enable that. But now it's completely out of control. People like Adam Smith could never have comprehended what this system would turn into. The intrinsic flaws of it have exploded. And now you have this lopsided society, you have people making money off of money, no one's producing, you have inefficiency as the driver mechanism. Deprivation is key to this system, believe it or not. It wouldn't really work if there wasn't deprivation. So this is how it's evolved, and I think the best way to look at it is from that neutral standpoint, regardless of how much turmoil and complexity is ahead of us. And ultimately, even if it didn't work out, even if society ended up as an evolutionary cul-de-sac, even that's natural. So I'm mildly existentialist in all of this. I don't get too emotionally involved. I just follow the train of thought, and I encourage all of you to think about it as sort of in that realm. Because the moment you start to get emotionally involved with this, especially the gravity of this, then you'll start to pollute yourself. And it's a great personal trial to do that, but I do recommend that view, witness kind of view. Just look at yourself and what you're doing from an external third party, and then it feels much more manageable.
I want to include some of the people up in the balconies. So the gentleman over here that are yes, please, if you can please state your name and ask your question clearly so we can hear you all the way down here.
My name is Gabriel. Thank you very much for your work. Seeing all your movies and saw a lot about people. I have a good question for you. Obviously, you exposed very, very well, but you never delved into the possible why, which could be in a realm of speculation. My question to you is just simply yes or no. Do you have an idea of why these people would do this system like this, basically this manner? It's obviously not applicable, produce humanity.
It's not a causality like that. It's an evolutionary causality. So if you track what we've been doing for the past couple thousand years, you can go back to the earliest onslaught of scarcity. You can follow through the early civilizations, Mesopotamia. And you begin to realize that everyone had the fundamental assumption that we couldn't get along because we'd been battling before that. It was very much a survival of the fittest, social Darwinism type of thing. It's natural enough. You get people in a room, there's not enough to go around, invariably they might start to fight. But we've evolved, our brains have evolved, we have the lower reptilian fight or flight reactions, they're still there. And that's really where the system is based. But we've also evolved the cerebral cortex. We can think. We don't have to respond to those limited matters anymore. Point being is that there isn't a singular causality. I don't actually blame anybody anymore. That's something that I grew out of a number of years ago. I realized with great influences that you can't pose blame on a person or group or ideology of that group per se. It's the train of thought that's impaired. It's the train of thought. So it's natural evolution, but now we're stifling ourselves because we're not allowing the next level to come forward that will enable all the things that are possible and create social balance. And that's the big conundrum. And I will say, though, when it comes to people, there are groups out there, the market system advocates, the people that still support the vision of society, sovereignty, nations, all the things that are inhibited, evolutionary baggage that were serving a function at some point. They are, as an entity, something to be reckoned with. I do think there's a great deal of threat because of how unevolved most of their awarenesses are. And I definitely don't advocate any kind of overthrow of governments or violence of any court, but it's important people do realize that you're up against some super stubborn, extremely powerful people, and the only way this type of transition will emerge is through some type of massive grassroots thing that makes, the Occupy movement look like a drop in the bucket. It's going to have to be very large in order for some type of real change to happen, to overcome the severe psychological baggage of those in power.
Thank you.
That's going to be difficult because your motto is a leaderless movement. So.
I'm not leading anything.
Exactly.
I'm just talking.
You haven't been seeing his t-shirts. The t-shirts say a leaderless movement. You know what
We're not monkeys anymore. We can develop and condition environments so we don't fall back on those primitive notions where we relegate our power. Don't people want to think for themselves? I think they do. They don't want to constantly relegate their power to other people. That's what the system supports, and it's unfortunate that stuff persists, but it does. Why do we even have a president? Why is there a president? And why does he have power that overrules everything else? It doesn't matter the race of the president. It doesn't matter the sex of the president. We shouldn't even have that concept. It's so backwards and diluted and foreign and neurotic, and baggage is so far back. We live in a dynastic state. The divinity of kings is still alive, unfortunately. It's just cleverly masked by modern suits and all the conveniences that kind of make us think that this is normality or this is acceptable or this is the way it should work.
Before we move on to the next person in the front, I just want to say real quickly, when we showed this film, actually, we were part of the global premiere that took place in January, and we showed this in Los Angeles, and there were how many people? That was a huge auditorium. About 1,000 people came to the screening that we put together with Peter for the premiere of this film in Los Angeles. And you had all the T-shirts in the green room that said "A Leaderless Movement." And I was just looking.
My shirts, I don't remember those.
Bettina has one. A leaderless.
Actually, I have two. Yes.
She has two. That's why you don't have them. She swiped them from the green room. But there were the T-shirts that were saying "A Leaderless Movement," and I remember looking at that T-shirt thinking, "But if we have a leaderless movement, then who's leading us?" And it just took me a moment to just kind of do the Buddhist meditation, turn inward, and say, I got it.
But that's only a condition. That's only
So it's good to say a leaderless movement in the front of the T-shirt, and then on the back say meditate, and you'll get it. You'll understand what we mean by a leaderless movement. You become the leader.
The only leader or loyalty that can exist is a particular train of thought. That's all there is. Humans don't actually represent anything. They only are congealed thought processes that are passed through entities with various conditioning education. It's like every word comes out of my mouth has been taught to me. All the values I have are culminated fundamentally from my experience as I've grown up. So what you end up with is even in the most technically firm analysis, there can't be a leader of any kind. No one's novel in that regard, so no one has all the information. And therefore, you can only be loyal to a train of thought. Only. You can't.
We need to bring those T-shirts back and then put the leaderless movement in the front, and then in the back give people a clue to meditate, turn in, and you'll get what the leaderless movement is all about. The gentleman in the front with the pink.
Oh, red, that's okay.
He's like, it's not pink, it's red.
That's short as possible.
Yes, please.
First of all, thank you very much, Artivist Film Festival. Thank you very much, everybody who came here, because we're doing a great job here, guys.
Okay, that deserves a round of applause. We love it, you're fine.
You one of the very few people that inspired me, so thank you very much for that. And the question, I have two quick questions. First, social pathology to me is the biggest problem is an awareness. out of resources, there will be a moment when it's going to be so little that the world will be in conflict. And since we all have to survive, we'll be fighting with each other.
We're trying to
and the
avoid
second question is, by the way, do you think they should be applied in the future when we all become a moment and will be a great society? There will be direct democracy. Basically, any new regulation will be authority for the new regulation with the people that this regulation affects. So, I don't like to right now.
Appreciate that.
Voting for one or two things, but for any new regulation that is going to be applied, everybody can vote.
Okay, and the answer to the first question, we've already hit a point based on establishment methods, such as the hydrocarbon economy, that scarcity is a very real reality, even though they don't talk about it. Why did we really go into Iran? Why are we inching towards Iran? Why is the Middle East so important to Western interests? And energy is such a massive and obvious point, even though it's almost cliche to even bring it up, it's so obvious. But we're already there in that regard as far as energy is concerned. It doesn't have to be that way. Obviously, you know that. As far as energy scarcity, as far as resource scarcity, there are a number of scientific breakthroughs from the production of alloys for substitution all the way to molecular engineering, which could come about even in the market system. But since the system is based on inefficiency, those types of things are going to be so pushed low. They're going to be so, just like the electric car is just now inching in after so many decades. I think the first electric car was like 1870 or something. It's nuts that we still haven't persevered with that. Why? Because it's the turnover within the gasoline economy is that important to it. There's way too much GDP being driven by it. It slowly changes, but yes, I answer your question in short. You could have a point where massive world wars, I think, are on edge. It would not surprise me if a energy-driven world war was around the corner. If countries do not immediately start moving into renewables and start to basically push aside their market economies to allow for that, because anyone who really goes for renewables in the so-called green economy, they're going to lose a massive amounts of turnover once they do that because of the very nature of what that is. The very nature of harnessing those renewables immediately eliminates so much turnover for an economy. That's what's really underlying the fact that there's no transition. That's what underlies the fact that there's very little transition to any of these so-called green things that we keep hearing about, is that because it's too stifling towards the market system. And there's a syntax of thought in the way people that when they run business that they can rationalize and figure this stuff out, and they make it seem normal within their frame of reference, which is business and money and turnover. Doesn't matter how badly a society's getting, as long as the profits are being made, the logic is clicking because that's all they've been taught. So I agree with you. Yeah, you could easily have World War. I've been talking about that for a while, and that's what makes this Iran conflict that's looming with the U.S. and the Chinese counterpart to it, and even the Russian counterpart to it, so frightening because we're seeing the world powers slowly start to get really agitating towards each other once again. And I can see energy being a huge catalyst for that, not to mention some minerals that are now growing scarce as well. In answer to your other question regarding direct democracy, yeah, I agree with that, but let's remember that democracy is non-rule. Democracy is based on the assumption that those participating are educated enough to make the proper decision. Democracy is 10 white men hanging one black. That's what democracy is in its core foundation. That's why the United States was based on a constitutional referendum, which meant that they had to have some preset things that no one could really change, at least if they were to be changed, very difficult, that would override all the possible flaws of democracy. And it's worked a little bit, not really. So really the train comes back down to the train of thought, what makes a sustainable economy, what creates human peace, what creates true structural sustainability on all walks, not just technical infrastructure, but creates peace of mind, creates balance, creates quality, reduces disorders that cause problems and biases and prejudices, and all that evolutionary value as well. That being said, I don't really believe in pure democracy. Okay? It doesn't make sense from a technical standpoint. This structure wasn't built based on democracy, it was based on scientific principles. A society needs to be constructed based on a scientific reference. It needs to be based on what works, based on what we know, not what the whims of a particular demographic or subset wants. You know what I mean? That's how we got into the trouble that we're in now. So in the midst of all of that, in this calculation process that society unfolds, we need to calculate society and build it based on this awareness, this referent, physical earth referent, physical scientific referent, which has only been with us for a few thousand years, loosely. It's unbelievable when you think about how unscientific everything is. there is always a place for democracy and choice because we don't know everything. We don't have all the knowledge at one time. It's impossible. So there's always going to be stuff that people need to find consensus with. Systems like that will learn. But they won't be like what we have. There won't be congressional committees and presidents. There'll be scientists and engineers, yeah. But it'll be...
They choose one, two things. Nobody chooses to go to war or choose this, NTAA, university. Nobody chooses this. I mean, majority usually, if something affects some people, all these people that this affects, they're supposed to vote. They're supposed to have consensus vote. The majority decides what's going to happen.
I think in the future, once we overcome all those issues that we are plagued with now, such as the fact that, yes, the U.S. government will do whatever it wants without public consensus as far as war, just like most empires have done. When we get beyond a lot of that, the real democratic process is really just the foundational infrastructure of society and the goods being produced and the things that actually support life. That's the ideal. You know what I mean? So when people get together to decide what to create to improve society, therein lies a certain sense of democracy because the wants and needs are taken into account. There's various creative attributes that we enjoy and don't necessarily have utility per se, except maybe for improving our health, for pleasantries and things that relieve stress, stuff like that. That becomes subjective to a certain degree. But the majority of it isn't subjective. The majority of it is firmly technical. So, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, now I do want to have perhaps 2 more questions before we move on to the next section. I don't know how many minutes we've been already going, but I just want to...
It's 10:20, so...
Okay, so probably 2 more questions, 2 or 3 more questions. I do want to include the lady in gray with the gray jacket that looks about gray or black. The lady right here. You had a question? If you could please rise, give your name, and state your question.
My question is, agree that the brain has evolved, and is evolving very rapidly with the inclusion of the collective unconscious of the internet. Because we have access to infinite technology in order to increase exponentially. Do you think that we evolve to the point that if and when the system does collapse, or if
We evolve to a point where if and when the system collapses,
yes, if and when this change occurs, with the absence of commercial advertising, some cliche, conspicuous consumption, access to a living self-good, are we in human nature, that our human nature can function the greater good? Are we capable, without any intervention, of taking care of the planet?
Well, I think the example...
it's a very good question.
I think it's a great question, and so let's both answer. You answer first.
I was just going to say that there's plenty of examples with familial relations to show that there is an obvious instinct that's there, just like in the animal kingdom. And I think one thing that wasn't put in this film, but it's stated by Dr. Robert Sapolsky in the first section of the film, is he talked about how there always seems to be, in the primate species, us against them. It's very common, not universal, there's some exceptions to that. But he commented that what we decide is the they, if you will, the them, could be any. Like it's completely immutable. Right, and it could be to a point where I believe that we're the true enemies of humanity. Earthquakes, diseases, and disasters. Those are true enemies, not us. We are now, of course, but so if you get to a point where you think to yourself, okay, you have your family, care for your family, then you have your neighborhood, you care for your neighborhood. The tribe begins to extend, and eventually the tribe will extend all the way empathetically to the entire human species. I think it's already become. I think with the advent of technology, the words of Albert Einstein, when he experienced the nuclear bomb in the 40s, he said, our technology has exceeded our humanity. And I think it's a great point because it shows that we're not mature enough to handle these new advents. And I think, as I've stated in numerous interviews, that our personal interest must become social interest for our long-term evolutionary fitness. Because if we don't begin to work together in some basic way, we will highly probably create so much destruction as we fight each other as our technology improves with nanotech weapons now. It's unbelievable what's possible. So we have to do something to get the system to support that ethic before it's too late on that level. So.
Now,
I think humanity also has potential to rise above. And I think because there's education and awareness, communication, and I think that I believe that humanity has a lot of positives, and I think we can achieve that if we really listen to each other and communicate and work together and just spread the news and just get into positive actions. Yeah.
And I see so many hands up, but I do want to reach out to the gentleman right here, right in front of me, up in the balcony. Yes, please. Your name, please. Yes.
Actually, very simple question. The rest of you interview a lot of people like John Perkins and people in business that have come out of it and been like, this is complete chaos that's going on. As far as I know, you do not.
Corporate
So what kind of corporate business was Peter? So what was your history, Peter, before you started making films?
I was a trained classical percussionist in school. That was what I did as in my failed attempts to be a professional when I was never actually interested in professionalism in my life. I just liked it for fun. I still do as a very serious hobby. And then I had to move into advertising to find something to pay me. So I started doing music composition and video editing for advertising off the cuff. That's how I fell into that world. Apart from that, at one point in my hatred towards advertising back then, I wanted to figure out how to get out of the system. And I say this, and some might be shocked at this, but I was also an equity trader for many years, privately, because it was the only field I could find, regardless of its malintent, that enabled me to be completely free and not have a boss, not have a client. And that was the state of mind. I was as much victimized in the system as anyone else. I was pure self-preservation. I was more enlightened, I feel, than most, but I wanted to get out and not have to deal with the nonsense, especially in advertising. And I did that in part for a good period. And that's basically the end of it. And I started to do the film stuff at the tail end of the advertising world. It got really popular, and I quit advertising, and now I'm doing my best to kind of keep this going. Thanks.
Fantastic. And on that note, should we take one more question? All right, so we'll take one more question, and I want to be totally biased, so I'm just going to point. Oh, I guess it's a gentleman with a plaid shirt.
Hi, my name is Matt. I'm from New York City. I just wanted to ask, you claim that the Zeitgeist movement is activist arm of the
Can you please speak up louder? What is your question, sir?
My question is that you claim that the Zeitgeist movement is the activist arm of the Venus Project.
It used to be the activist arm explicitly, but it's now
Catch up, buddy.
Due to developments in the Venus Project that have chosen to be more isolated in their work. But we still advocate the exact same train of thought.
Right, so I'm assuming that's the end goal, though, what the Venus Project promotes.
There's no such thing as an end goal, though, because all of Jacques' work is built upon the same foundational train of thought. And that's something, again, I can't reiterate enough. One thing that scares me is when, and I'm not going to say this to you, I just want to comment on this, is when people start to reference singular individuals and cult of personality issues or one institution, and they advocate only that, and they don't communicate the train of thought. And that's a failure of communication. And that's why the movement is broader in its view. It takes on not just Jacques' work, but many other people's work to bring it to the forefront and show the importance of that.
Absolutely. My question is that I'm sure many people realize, and I don't know if you realize this at some point, you're kind of going from negative 10 to positive 10 in terms of what it is that the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist movement wants to accomplish. So my question is, what's the next step on a kind of societal and structural level? What would you say is the next step kind of to go for?
Well, until, as stated earlier, there's the educational imperative, as cumbersome and as difficult it is for all of us to accept, the need to get human society on average on the same plane. With the advent of the internet, it's not as hard as it may sound, but still amazes me the revolutions that have occurred in the past, if you want to use that term revolution, without the internet, without even phones. People that were able to engineer movements that did accomplish things, at least for a little while, out of just word of mouth. So the possibilities are there for such a thing. And that's why
I got my little boy
is fundamentally to get as many people across the world into one general frame of mind and hope that we can start to design systems within that can be implemented later. I have a lot of different projects that are running with the Zeitgeist movement. One is called the Global Redesign Institute, which is basically building upon the work of people like Jacques Fresco and Buckness before, making an open platform, an open source platform where people can actually contribute ideas for design for their region, where you can show, for example, I'm in Los Angeles currently, Los Angeles is one of the most efficiently designed things out there. It's unbelievable. If you ever drive in Los Angeles, that's why this is not New York. It's bad enough in New York to drive. At least there is the subway, and at least it does work. It does go places as opposed to Los Angeles. So there's a huge efficiency that could be put forward to make people's lives so much easier, but they don't know it because they've never been introduced to such ideas. They don't think that far outside. They only know what they've been groomed into and born into. So bringing such design ideas and having conferences globally, apart from our Zeitgeist Day events and things like that, but showing the world what's possible. Like, you get a team of engineers and thinkers and artists to redesign the whole island of Manhattan to show what's possible. Forget money, forget all the things that go along with that you hear people object to. How much is that going to cost? It's not a matter of affordability, it's a matter of if it's possible and do we have the resources. If you can get that implanted, then that will be, to me, the next stage. I think eventually, with the breakdown, some countries are going to say, forget this, we can't survive like this, we have 70, 80% people in poverty. I think Latin America is ripe for this type of design revolution, in the words of Dr. Fuller. It slowly would come to fruition, but other than that, it's so hard to predict.
And it's also changing our priorities, because someone would argue, well, how much money are we spending now to go to war? How much money are we spending now in what we're spending it now? So it's also about redistributing our resources and prioritizing ourselves, and obviously redistributing our resources accordingly.
I'll say, to add to that, in closing, if you actually looked at all the technical advancements in the Pentagon and the war industry across the world, if you just thought about how advanced that stuff is and what they're able to do, and actually apply that to, say, feeding people, apply that to doing fundamental social things, curing a disease, getting scientists oriented on true solution-oriented stuff, you'd see a rapid change almost overnight. Just had that, instead all that energy is going towards destruction of each other. It's amazing.
Humanity has a potential to really, like you just said, and I love that idea that everyone is welcome based on science to come up with creative ideas. I think it's very scary if we go and look at just for one person to have all the answers. I think that's a scary thought. And I think true democracy, if you want to use that word, I think is in itself if you invite everyone to participate and just share their ideas, and it's creative, it's positive, and the most positive change, and I think that's so inspiring, and I think that's a fantastic idea.
And participating from the point of view of leaderless movement. So I'll let you think about that when we watch the second part of the show.
I'll just say this to introduce this section. This is the Project Earth section, which is probably the most difficult for me to watch because I feel like it's almost condescending to the audience. So if you feel that way, I apologize. But it's so foreign, it's so commonplace what's described in this section, but yet you'll find the majority of people, it's so foreign to their way of thinking because of the way they've been groomed. So if you're like me and this is all common sense, I thank you. I hope it is.
Yes, and please definitely join us after the screening where we continue our Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.